Michigan State football's preparation for the 2023 season began over a month ago after finishing with a road loss to the now 11-2 top 10 Penn State Nittany Lions. Michigan State began the year in a similar position and in similar standing to where Penn State stood before their Rose Bowl victory. Many expected that the Spartans would finish with a 9-3, 10-2, maybe 8-4, or at worst 7-5, or maybe at best 11-1 record, and be likely a top 25 team, if not a top 15, top 10 team. In fact, ESPN's way too early top 25 and its updated editions had Michigan State ahead of Michigan, and ahead of Penn State, and ahead of every Big Ten team except for Ohio State. And as with some teams every year, the analysts, the experts get it wrong. I myself had Michigan State going 8-4. I had them as a top 20 team, and I thought they would find some success despite taking a step back from last year's fantastic 11-2 season. That did not happen at all. And now Michigan State is going to be a team who went from having lots of national respect, having lots of recruiting momentum, to probably being under the radar until something else changes. I don't see Michigan State being ranked in likely anyone's top 25 entering next season outside of maybe some Michigan State fans. And that's just because fan bases, for the most part, are always biased toward their own team, or if they hate the current coach in charge of their team, they're biased against their own team so they can get the man fired and bring in someone new. Mel Tucker has certainly so far had an up-down tenure with Michigan State. 2-5 in 2020, an 11-2 season in 2021 that was fantastic. Lots of close games won, lots of big games won, only 2 games lost to teams that finished with 9 wins or more, in Purdue, who was 9-4, and I thought was a top 25 team, and in Ohio State, who was 11-2, and a team that if they beat Michigan, or maybe if they beat Oregon and just, had that extra regular season win, they could have done damage in the playoffs with the offense that they had. But that's the past, that's the backstory, that's the foundation. And where does Michigan State go from here? Well, we don't know. But what is certainly possible is that Michigan State could shock the world next year in 2023. They have a schedule that once again will be very tough. It'll be very challenging. The Spartans' schedule this year was ranked 13th in the nation according to Sports Reference. It was ranked 5th in the nation according to ESPN's Football Power Index. According to SRS, they're the 67th best team in the country. According to FPI, they were in the 40s in that metric. And by just win-loss record, they were 85th in the country out of 131 teams. Their scoring offense was 92nd. Their scoring defense was 77th, both in the 20s for points scored and points allowed per game. This team was dismal. And it was a team that originally looked like it was suffering from injuries and bad luck, especially as the middle of November appeared when Michigan State, after they got some health back, beat Illinois, beat Rutgers, and were 1 game away from being bowl eligible. And then the Indiana game happened. Indiana is a trash dog water team, and Michigan State lost to them at home. And for me as a Michigan fan, that was like the point where I'm viewing Michigan State and what's going on, and I'm thinking there need to be changes made, both on the roster, in the coaching staff. Marco Coleman is the only position coach change that has occurred, and that was by his own will. He's gone. He's returning to Georgia Tech. There's an article by MLive talking about it. I'm going to link it down below, but basically Brent Key hired him back. Brent Key is a Georgia Tech alum who is now their head coach. He was the interim head coach for more than half of the 2022 season, brought Georgia Tech more success than they've seen in the entirety of the Jeff Collins era, and he brought back Marco Coleman, which is huge because Marco Coleman has been, along with Brandon Jordan, in my opinion, Michigan State's best, or one of their best recruiters. And you see that in the 2023 recruiting class with the fact that 3 out of the top 4 recruits are either edge players or defensive linemen. The Spartans do have a lot returning, and they have a good quality recruiting class coming in, and they do have staff continuity, which I think is a bad thing, but there could be an argument that it is a good thing, especially with a lot of the inferior depth and talent they have compared to the rest of the Big Ten. We'll just have to wait and see what happens in 2023. I'm going to preview their schedule, and then we're going to get into the transfer portal, recruiting, talk about some of their returning starters. In 2023, the Spartans open up September 2nd on a Saturday against Central Michigan at home. That should be a victory. Same with Richmond the following week, September 9th, also a Saturday. The first test is once again Washington, who the Spartans host on Saturday, September 16th. That will be their final non-conference game, but with Washington returning a chunk of their offensive line, wide receivers, bringing in a good running back via the portal, and more importantly, returning Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback, Washington, I think very well, is a top 15, top 10 caliber of team. And if you're a State fan, what stinks about that is Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State are not just top 10, they're probably all going to be top 8, top 7, top 6, top 5, maybe all of them top 4. Maryland the following weekend will also be a home game, so the Spartans open up with 4 straight home games. And then the final day of September, Saturday, September 30th, the Spartans will travel to Kinnick Stadium at Iowa. Saturday, October 7th, they get a bye week. They play at Rutgers the 14th, host Michigan for the annual rivalry game in Spartan Stadium on October 21st. They travel to Minnesota the 28th, host Nebraska the 4th, travel to Ohio State the 11th, travel to Indiana the 18th, and they host Penn State for the land-grant trophy November 25th, that will basically be my birthday weekend, where I get to watch Michigan State and Penn State tackle, and I get to watch the game, the greatest rivalry in college football and sports history. That's the Spartans' schedule. And that schedule's a tough schedule. And there's a very realistic scenario where Michigan State could again have a losing season next year, or go 6-6, or go 7-5. But with what they have returning, Michigan State could do better than that. They could do what many would think of as the unthinkable. In the same way that reacting to Tucker as if he was a top 10 coach, or possibly the best coach in the Big Ten, after 2021, in the same way that was an overreaction, I think that swinging the opposite direction and treating him as one of the worst Big Ten head coaches, or, saying that his program will be incapable of doing anything in 23, could also be swinging to too much of an extreme, especially with what they have returning. Michigan State returns first at skill position, quarterback Peyton Thorne, running back Jalen Berger, and wide receivers Keon Coleman and Trey Mosley. They lose Reed to the draft. They lose Jeremy Bernard, transferring back to Washington, but they do also bring in some portal players. They return Malik Carr at tight end. They lost Daniel Barker to the draft, but they bring in 3 tight ends via the portal. Most importantly, I think they bring in running back Nathan Carter, who played in 4 games at UConn this past season. 65 attempts, 405 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 6.2 yards per carry. He was a sophomore this past season. He's 5'9", 199 pounds. He's built well, and I think that he will definitely be in the running back rotation along with Jalen Berger, who it's been made very clear by the staff, even when it looked like Elijah Collins at times was definitely the better running back, the staff views Berger as the future. I mean, they would force feed him and Brassard at times before Brassard got phased out for Collins. They'd force feed them the ball knowing that it just wouldn't work and that they would lose yards, get back to the line of scrimmage, or simply gain 1 yard. I think Carter, along with the defensive lineman transfer from Texas A&M, who's ranked as a 92, according to 24/7 Sports, I think those are the 2 highlight players to watch in the portal for Michigan State. Jeff Pietrowski and Elijah Collins would be the 2 biggest losses along. I think Jeremy Bernard would be a bigger one, but since he's already committed to Washington, it slipped my mind that he even left, and he was only at Michigan State for 1 year too. Nathan Carter's coming in from UConn at running back, Aaron Alexander from UMass at linebacker, Dre Butler at defensive line, and then the 3 tight ends that are coming in are Jalen Franklin from Wisconsin. You also have Tynell Hopper from Boise State, and you have a guy from Norfolk State, Ademola Felai. Maybe I mispronounced that name. If so, I apologize. And then you also got Jonathan Kim at kicker coming in from North Carolina to replace Jack Stone, who left for Baylor. He was Michigan State's true freshman kicker. Michigan State also, most importantly, has defensive players returning, and they have players in the trenches who return. There's a nice article by the Free Press, the Detroit Free Press, that I'm going to be reading parts of it to you guys today, but I'll link the full article down below, and I encourage you to read it. Very educational, talking about who returns, who doesn't, bringing in some statistics, but also some perspective. Michigan State football, they return offensive lineman Nick Semek and J.D. Duplain, who have had several starts, both started in every game this past season, and Chris Bogle, who only started 4 games last season before being injured in a season-ending injury, he returns as well. Jacoby Windman is still, from what I understand, it's not known if he is going to return or not. I expect him to return, seeing that he only played in 8 games and he hasn't made an announcement yet. Elijah Collins, on the other hand, he is in the portal, so we're not going to be talking about him that much. All I'm going to say is he probably wants to go somewhere where he's not in a rotation and he's undisputed running back number 1. Because with how he's built and the type of running back he is, you can feed it to him 30, maybe even 40 times per game. I think if he wants to have a future in the NFL, I think he does need to be the undisputed running back number 1. So I think that's why he's in the portal. Tucker said that there are guys still deciding. We've got a couple that I think after they see what we did today, or we're going to have to come back and be a part of it. I think that was talking about National Signing Day and that the success there, along with, the announcement that Nick Semek and J.D. Duplain are returning. Windman's a big question mark when it comes to returning, and he is, because I think next year will probably be the best defensive player for Michigan State. He led the nation in forced fumbles. MSU also added, they got a commitment from Nathan Carter, who we've already talked about, and Jaron Mangum, who's from South Florida, both on Wednesday. Berger, Jordan Simmons, Devion Prim, Mangum, and Nathan Carter. That is a running back room certainly with depth. There may not be an explosive all Big Ten level guy on there, but you certainly have depth and you have competition, and that's something that you need at that position and that Michigan State needs at every position for them to grow. Semek started all 12 games at center. He led MSU with 803 snaps, which has to be toward the height of Big Ten offensive linemen by snap count. And then Duplain earned the starting role immediately as a true freshman in 2019, and he has started 35 of his 41 career games. Tucker says that we feel good about our O-line room. He also gives updates at other positions. Of course, Peyton Thorne is returning at QB. Noah Kim and Caden Hauser are staying. Keon Coleman and Trey Mosley, Monterey Foster at wide receiver. Tight ends Malik Carr and Jack Nickel are returning. Bogle, Tank Brown, Avery Dutton at defensive end. Simeon Barrow, Maverick Hansen at defensive tackle. And then at punter, you have Ryan Eckley and Stephen Rusnak as well returning there. It's just an update talking about, the roster and the depth chart. They returned several players in the trenches and on defense that we've already talked about, and the defense, I think, will improve in 2023. I think it'll ride some of that momentum that you saw in November, and they are bringing in guys on defense as well. The defense this year was more plagued by injuries than it was by play calling, organization, all of that. That was more the offense. The offense was the crux of most incompetence on the entire staff. The defense was plagued with injuries. Jacob Slade and Xavier Henderson just being out for a while really hurt. No, it didn't improve enough for the defense to be even close to championship caliber. I don't know if it'll be championship caliber next year, but it should certainly improve. And Michigan State has one of the better 2023 recruiting classes by quality. And last that I made the slides, they do have the 8th best portal class. It is now the 11th best portal class, but it is a near top 10 class. 8 of the 11 commits are ranked by 24/7 Sports. Their 2023 high school recruiting class, that is 21st overall, including the portal and including high school rankings. And they're close, I think they're around 30 in high school recruiting. And they have 15 commits. They have an average rank of high 80s. I think it's an 89 something. It's 26th is their high school recruiting ranking. By Joby, Andrew DePape, Jordan Hall, Jalen Thompson. Those are their top 4 players, all defense, all front 7 players, and 3 of them will play on the defensive lines. That just goes to show how good of a recruiter that Marco Coleman, who's now on Georgia Tech, and Brandon Jordan, who's still on staff and is the pass rush specialist, that goes to show how good they are at recruiting. So can Michigan State shock the world in 2023? What's their outlook? I think that expectations should be reasonable. I don't think that anyone should be preaching anything above 8-4, because that with Iowa, Washington, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, those are 5 teams that I think will be top 15, top 25 teams at minimum. It'll be very hard for Michigan State to beat 4 of those 5 teams, as Washington, Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State all have offenses to abuse Michigan State's defense, and Iowa's a road game in the snake pit that is Kinnick Stadium against one of the top 10 defenses in the country. But Michigan State, they shouldn't be overlooked either, because with what Tucker did in 2021, with the amount of guys they're bringing in the portal, and with the fact that, Michigan State, they're in the underdog position now. And Michigan State does very well when they're put in that underdog position. So we'll see what Michigan State does in 2023. My thoughts are 7-5, 8-4, 6-6 in that range. And I'd say 7-5 is certainly the most likely record for the Spartans to have. This team will definitely improve compared to this year's team. And with the amount of injuries they suffered last season, it would be highly unlikely they would repeat that series of unfortunate injuries. And if they do, it would definitely point to a strength and conditioning and coaching staff error. So I think 7-5, probably losses to those top 25 teams that I mentioned in Washington, Iowa, Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State. Maybe they win one of those games and go 8-4, or maybe they win one of those games but lose another random game to like Maryland or Indiana or Rutgers, Nebraska, Minnesota, one of those teams. But the Spartans will improve next year. That's for certain in my opinion, and that's all I have to say in this video. If you liked it, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on Michigan State's season down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.